It's finally starting to feel a lot like hockey season, at least here in central New York. We have our first snowfall today, actually sticking on
You
the ground.
did?
Right now,
Oh my
currently right
God.
now. So we're in it. I had to order new mittens today. I knew it was happening. Even though I don't leave the house all that often these days because I work from home, but I love my middies, so I had to get new ones. But is it cold enough there for that for down in dirty Staten Island?
Yeah, so, okay. Friggin' Saturday, 70 degrees. Sunday, 40. Make it make sense to me. I enjoyed my 70-degree day. Then Sunday came and it was 40. Was a little concerned for the 30% difference in temperature, but then at the same time, it's not my fault. It's not like I did anything. So I just said, you know what? I'm gonna be guilt free of my 70-degree day that I enjoyed on Saturday. So nothing I can do about global warming.
Yeah, James Nichols, ignorance is bliss. He's going to change his handle on Twitter and Instagram, and he'll start a new podcast called Ignorance is Bliss. Yeah, it is a little crazy. I was like wearing flip flops and like hanging out outside on Saturday, and then immediately turned the heat on and made soup on Sunday. So it was a little
Right.
bit of a change there. Even for here, although it's late to snow here, frankly, we're like a few weeks late for the first snowfall. But I guess it's here. Got to bundle up. I got a new knitted hat someone made for me, so I'm stoked, and I'm not wearing it
Nice.
right now. But yeah, it definitely feels like hockey season. Like I'm going to beer league games, and it's a little chilly out when you go and you're carrying your bag. It kind of gets you in the mood a little bit. It's a little tough when it's dark out at 4:00, 4:30, whatever. But it is finally, it's almost 20 games into the season, but it really does feel like hockey season now. And there was plenty of Islanders hockey to talk about since last week. And I'm going to throw it over to you for today. And you're going to lead this because
Sure.
you're in a mode. I feel it. I feel this energy from you. So I'm gonna pass the mic, figuratively anyway, over to you to kind of lead us here through the episode.
Yeah, so like fun fact before we hopped on this episode, I'm actually in the middle of covering the Devils game right now. And I had
Boo.
a video come out earlier with the fourth period today with some more video content that I did. So yeah, you're right. I am kind of in a mode right now.
Well,
But let's
I'll
start
say
off.
this: we have to be careful here because the Devils are good now. It's not like the Devils suck, and we can kind of just like talk about it and it's whatever. Like this is like a potential second round matchup at this point, or something like
Yes,
that.
sir.
One of them could drop into a wild card at some point. We're only 20 games into the season, but the closer we get to Thanksgiving, maybe even Christmas, the way that it shakes out in the standings might be how we look at it. So we might need to limit some Devils talk here before we get some bad feedback.
Yes,
Even
sir.
though
The
there's no
Devils.
doubt, like the Devils are good, but
No, but there's also no doubt that the Islanders are good. And that brings me to our first talking point of the day was the game against Arizona. And they dropped that game 2-0. It was a game in which the Islanders played a look, I'll say this. I watched the Arizona Coyotes play the Devils the other day in person, and the first thing I was impressed with was their speed. And whenever a team like that who possesses a lot of speed is going to play the Islanders, although they're trying to play a faster game, don't have the foot speed per person to keep up with a team like Arizona, who is actually very fast. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they're all that great of a team. Now, they did come into Long Island, I think, on a 2-game win streak, and the game against the Islanders was their third win. So they were building a little bit of momentum there. But, you know, I do wonder, right? Is there cause for concern when the Islanders, who, like you and I stated, are again top two in the Metropolitan Division, on a bit of a heater right now? Despite this game, is there cause for concern when the Islanders allow a team like the Arizona Coyotes to creep in like that and take a game 2-0 when they're at the bottom of the league and the Islanders are top four?
Yeah, I mean, the Islanders are still on their way to figuring some stuff out. So there are some games they have to cut them slack. And Arizona doesn't have a whole lot to play for. And they're not as bad as people think. They're 6-8-1. There are worse teams than Arizona. They're not even the worst team in the West. I think Anaheim is much, much worse. But the Islanders are still figuring things out. Kevin Kurz wrote a great article about Sebastian Aho, and a number of defensemen, including Aho, stated how they're still making sure that they're doing the right things and not trying to force plays. And that's really what we saw from the entire back end, and really even the forwards when they had dropped a couple games in a row. It was like they were 2-4 going before their 5-game win streak. They were, I don't know if they were gripping their stick too tight, but they were trying to be maybe the opposite, maybe too loosey goosey, and just trying to play a little bit of offense there. Um, they seem to have figured that out, but they don't play opponents that are on paper in the standings, whatever, but beneath them in the standings as well as they play better teams. They seem to get up for those games against better teams and really lock it down. Um, so I don't know if there's cause for concern. I mean, Arizona's also beat really good teams. I think they beat Toronto, who's they're going through their own thing, so maybe that doesn't really count because on paper they're good, but they never translates. But Arizona has beaten some good teams, so like I don't know. Like they still won 6 out of 15 games. That's not great. Obviously, it's below 500, but they are winning hockey games. They're not as bad as everyone kind of made them out to be. Certainly not even as bad as last year. Um, if this was later in the season after Christmas and they're dropping a game like that, I think that was a bad game. I think that was just an overall bad game that they played. Um, they weren't really able to get things going. They continue to rely a little too heavily on their goaltending because that was a 1-0 game with an empty netter, right? So that's not even really, if I'm not mistaken. And the goal against was on the penalty kill, which has not been good lately. In the last week or so, has not been as good as the beginning of the season. I believe Brendan Burke said they've let in a goal when down a man in each of the last maybe 6 games. It's something like that, more
Yeah.
than a handful. And after starting whatever it was, 30 for 30 or something crazy like that, um, the number still looks good, but it's falling behind. So in a game like that, when that was providing you a little momentum, and then you're not playing well, and then the thing that usually propels you late in the game isn't able to do that, and then their power play is also not good. So any opportunities they had there aren't really clicking. So it's still like the normal problems. It just looks worse against the Arizona Coyotes. Maybe that's
Yeah.
the
Well,
conclusion.
you're absolutely right. They definitely did heavily depend on the goaltending, and like you said, it was a 1-0 game until the empty net goal. Ilya Sorokin made 26 saves on 27 shots, so he was superb. But right away, one of the things I'm looking at here is the Islanders only accrued 24 shots, which is below the benchmark for what they've been accruing game by game this season. They're over the 30 shot mark per game. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. I'm looking at the box score here for Arizona and the Islanders. But the biggest thing here that stands out to me is, and I always think about this because you put this in my brain. They out hit the Coyotes 36-27, which isn't necessarily a good thing, right? Because like you've said to me in the past, when you have more hits than the other team, that means you're chasing the puck a lot. And the biggest indicator of that for me is that the Islanders gave the puck away 15 times as opposed to the Coyotes 8. So the 15 giveaways is a concern for me. And like I said, maybe that has a lot to do with the foot speed that the Arizona Coyotes do possess. Because like I said, they have some really young, good players on that team. They're not a good team, but they have young, good talent in Clayton Keller, who's probably leading that team as far as skill goes. Dylan Gunther, who's a rookie in this league, but he's come on strong in a big way. This new kid too, who just started this season, I believe it's his rookie season as well. And I think he's like at the top of the rookie scoring. And Matthias Maselli, he's really good too. So they have some good young talent, but They're not necessarily a good team, and it's probably a team that the Islanders should have taken advantage of. So I don't necessarily love the idea. And like you said, it's okay that it's only November and it's still early. And if after Christmas, if this kind of thing is happening, sure, maybe we'll be a little bit concerned. But it was their first meeting of the year. And to boot too, this was a game at home, right? If this was a game in Arizona, and again, that's not even a home rink for them because of what the Mullet Arena is. But regardless, it's a game at home at UBS Arena. You would think that they would have been able to show up and close the door on a team where they should have collected those 2 points, and they didn't. Still plenty to be, optimistic about regarding the New York Islanders right now. But it was just concerning to me to see them, a little concerning to see them drop that game to the Arizona Coyotes. Although, again, the caveat there is they're a really fast team with young, skilled players. So that brings me to the next game, though, where the Islanders won in overtime 4-3 against the Columbus Blue Jackets. And this was another game where the Islanders didn't get on the board first. The Columbus Blue Jackets wind up, leading the game 3 minutes, with 3 minutes into the second period. No goals in the first period for either side, and it was just another one of those things where I was watching and I was like, what's going on, right? At this point, the Arizona Coyotes are in a better situation than the Columbus Blue Jackets because the Blue Jackets just lost Zach Werenski. That was a game where Patrick Laine got hurt in the game, and they're actually sitting legitimately at the bottom of the NHL right now. So what is going on with these slow starts? And
that's really it. That's really
right.
it.
Well,
is the
we
slow
spoke
starts,
about,
and it's it's the urgency, the lack of urgency in the beginning of the
right.
game. I don't know what isn't kicking them in the ass to start, and it's
Right.
not
So
easy to do, but that's the concern that I have.
So we're looking at a situation now where last week you and I spoke about it's a good thing that they can overcome the being behind by a goal or two and winning in the third period or in overtime. But however, they don't want to make that a habit, right? Fast forward a week later, and we're talking about okay, they're still winning by coming from behind, which is good, but also not good. And now they're beginning games on a slow pace to two teams who are for all intents and purposes going to be lottery teams by the end of the season. Is it that you think maybe they're not taking their opponents as seriously as they should, or is it just that it's between the ears and they're not playing up to where they should be playing up to?
It may be a little bit of both. I'd like to hope it's the latter, because they should. The good and bad thing about the NHL is any team can win on any given night. So you don't want to go into games thinking less of your opponents. You want to go in there as if they can beat you. And I'd be willing to believe that they're going in with that, at least that mindset. There's just something out of the gate in between the ears. I'm not sure what those conversations are. And maybe, I think being a resilient group, and I don't remember if I said this last week. I know I at least wrote it, that the thing that we were kind of poking fun at for a long time, and people around the league were poking fun at, it's that this was an old group. What that does allow you to do is be a little more confident in yourself, and these comeback wins really show that resiliency and really show that they know what they're capable of as a group, and they're all playing for each other, and it's the team, we over me kind of thing. There was a great quote by Zach Parise in a Curtis article recently, talking about that. And I think as a group, they're just confident that they can just stick to their game, and they're going to score 4 goals, whether the other team scores 3 first or the other team comes back. They're confident they can score the goals, and they're just kind of going in and doing their job. I do think the mistakes are just being capitalized on because they're still trying to figure out the defensive structure and that strategy. There's a couple of times when the defensemen are just getting beat to the outside pretty bad. I think I mentioned last week that a couple times it was like Romanov and maybe somebody else. They were just getting beat to the outside bad, like really bad. And it's some of those things, and maybe it's because the forwards aren't as dedicated in the defensive zone, and that structure has just changed because you have a winger, someone's trying to sneak behind the other team's defenseman or something like that, where you're losing what was really the Islanders' bread and butter, other than the goaltending, was just it was team defense. And now it's a little less that. They're depending more on just the defenders to play defense and maybe the center. So maybe that's part of it, is that they're still trying to figure that out, or maybe they need more help on D. I mean, they are winning games. They were able largely. I mean, I guess they had to come back. Was it 5-4 against the Avalanche? They did
Yeah.
beat Tampa. They did. I mean, they've beaten the Rangers now a couple of times. They had to come back. They had the 3-0 win. So you're seeing their ability to kind of, and the goaltending stats are pretty good. Both goalies are well above 920 or 920 and above. So the goals against aren't that. I think, and if we were better stewards of this kind of thing, we would have probably looked this up beforehand. But I guess who knows where the conversation is going to go. I think it's more about high danger chances against. That might be the number that I would compare 20 games in, 40 games in, 60 games in, compared to last year, or maybe not last year, but the last couple of seasons, and how they're limiting that. Maybe even last year. Look at Sorokin's numbers. That yeah, he saved their bacon, but and he still had a tremendous record. He still won 25 games, if I'm not mistaken, and had tremendous numbers. I wonder what those high danger chances were, and I wonder if that's flipping, because they're getting more shot volume right? They had 40 something shots the other night. I don't know if it was against Ottawa or Columbus. Now
Yeah,
one,
I think it was Ottawa.
and then they're definitely allowing more shots, which isn't a problem in and of itself. But I'm curious what the high danger chances are, because that's kind of where they're getting killed on some of these goals. It's not necessarily that it's just, I'm not looking at any of these goals and going, oh, these are soft. Like, I blame Sorokin. It's kind of like, what's going on around it? Are they getting just a clean look? The game against Calgary, I know we're going back a little bit, but like, there was one of those goals was just like, dude was in the high slot. He had all day, and the puck came from low to high, and Sorokin or whatever, I forget, maybe it was Varlamov, had to push out from the goal line. There's no way he was going to be able to do that. That would have been a tremendous save. So that's a number that I'm curious if that's gone up, and then what their high danger 5-on-5 save percentage is. So that might be what's lower than normal, and certainly below league average.
So let's take a look at the high danger numbers for Columbus in that game. In the first period, their high danger Corsi 4 was a 37.5. Their second period high danger Corsi 4 was a 46.15, and their third period Corsi high danger Corsi 4 percentage was 33.33. All under 50%. Not many high danger Corsi chances for, compared to how many the Islanders had. Yet, here's how the scoring went. It was Brock Nelson tying the game after Sillinger opened the scoring. Emil Bemstrom takes the lead back for the Columbus Blue Jackets halfway through the second period. And then Brock Nelson is the hero again and ties it up at the end of the second. We start the third period halfway through. Marcus Bjork scores his first NHL goal. Because that's what the Islanders do. They allow first NHL goals all the time, and they take the lead again. So 3 lead changes, all for the Columbus Blue Jackets through 50 minutes of play. And then, a couple minutes later, Scott Mayfield plays hero and ties the game up and sends it to overtime with about 7 minutes to go in the third period, before the Islanders lock it down and get it to 3-on-3. So, I mean, not a ton of good chances for the Columbus Blue Jackets there. Yet they scored 3 goals, and essentially sent the game to overtime, where Ilya Sorokin still made his save percentage in that game was .897. Now, is that a bad game by Ilya Sorokin, or did the system kind of break down against Columbus?
Yeah, that's kind of my point. Is I think it's I would wonder what that high danger save percentage is and against, and looking at the quality of the shots maybe being taken. I don't know how we look into that necessarily, but that's kind of what I would want to look into. Um, Even against Ottawa, you're not talking even with Varlamov and Ned, who played really well. I think both goalies are playing well. I wouldn't point to any of these losses and point to them. They're starting to give Varlamov a little more goal support, albeit it's late in games. So compared to last year, maybe where we were poking at Varlamov a little bit, where he went 8-17, and we hoped that he could flip it, which he's on his way to do at this point. Um, again, I wouldn't point to any of the mistakes that the Islanders are making to the goaltending, because they've definitely helped them win games. I think it's definitely more on the side of um, what the defensive structure in front of them, and they're just allowing mistakes. It's missed coverage, it's really turnovers, or and not being able to get the puck out of the zone, missed opportunities, and they're getting hemmed in a little bit. I don't think it's a lot of rush plays. I think it's definitely like it's a mix of things, but it's definitely them like getting hemmed in their zone at times, not being able to get the puck out. Like it does look messy. It doesn't look as structured and clean as we're used to at Trotz, and they might still just be trying to figure that out. Again, it might be a mix of like the forwards and the defensive group too. And you gotta remember, maybe Green was really holding it together on the back end. Pulak and Pelech are certainly veterans at this point, but someone going in and just kind of being able to lead by example, um, just playing the right way. You said it right when Green got on the team. Like, I've never seen this guy make a mistake. And for as
Right.
old as Green was, and you can point to all sorts of stuff with him, he really didn't. It was very rare, and he was just so dependable. Not really an all situations guy, although he's certainly used like late in games again, because he's going to do the right thing. He's going to get his stick on the puck, and it's going to leave the zone. Um, he's going to be able to move it to somebody. He was still pretty versatile. I'm glad he retired when he did, so he didn't start to look really really bad. Um, I don't know what his underlying numbers were, so maybe he started to already decline considerably. But the eye test certainly pointed to that he was still pretty steady, and maybe that plays a big difference. They don't really have that leader on the back end, um, like they did, and the structure change. So it might just take some getting used to. Somebody just needs to step up. They have Aho's not young, but he's not old. Um, it's kind of split in half, younger and older defensemen. Someone just kind of needs to take the reins there, maybe a little bit. And maybe Lambert needs to adjust. Like, this isn't the way that they're winning games, simply isn't sustainable. I think that's ultimately what we need to point to here. The way that they're winning games, this can't keep happening. They have third period heroics, and it's amazing. Nelson and Lee are really leading the way in goals. I believe 9 and 8 respectively. A bunch of guys have 4 and 5 goals. Defense is shipping in. The Islanders had 32 goals from defensemen last year, the whole season. They already have 13, and Dobson has 5, and he had 13 all last season. So
Yep.
they're getting the offensive input, right? But they need to tighten up on the back end. It's starting to be a little bit of a problem, and eventually they're gonna play a bunch of really good teams in a row, or a bunch of literally tough teams. I don't know if you watched the Nashville Rangers game, but that was like a physically tough game, and the Islanders can hang, but hopefully they don't get hemmed in like they're used to doing to other teams with the energy, and they just need to make sure that they can kind of keep it together for the rest of the season, and start to play better.
Well, they certainly turned things around when they went to Ottawa in a weird 5:30 start. What'd you think about that start, by the way?
I mean, I didn't mind because I really needed to go to bed early, just because I was like up late, and like this daylight savings is really kicking my ass. I don't know what was going on, but I just like it was like jet lag for like an entire week. I just couldn't figure it out. But so I didn't mind getting a little being able to watch an entire game. Um, was able to kind of exercise a little bit and watch the game. So I guess I kind of like that. A little bit of a rush after work, but um, It's interesting. I don't. It was one of the. It was kind of like that 1 o'clock start game, against Detroit, where like the team just like wasn't ready, and they looked pretty sloppy against Ottawa too in a 5:30 start. I get that they're definitely creatures of habit, and that might be some of these games that their 7:30 starts is just like that little bit different thing for them, and their starts are just weird. I don't know if a half an hour really does it. I get the 2 hours or 6 hour difference in the game start times can really throw you off, but I don't know about 2 hours early, like, or an hour early or something. Um, it was interesting. I immediately thought, I was like, if someone on the West Coast is watching this game, they were watching a game at like 2:30 in the afternoon, which I kind of thought was cool. I'd love to be able to like, skip out on work and and watch a live hockey game. Maybe I need to move to the West Coast or something, but
Yeah, it's funny you say that. There was a conversation with who else but our favorite uh podcast hosts that aren't us, Jeff Marek and Elliot Friedman, about the NHL has actually spoken about doing some sort of 24-hour. I don't know if it was like a one-time thing or they're looking into doing it for like a maybe like a week-long span or something like that. But 24 hours of hockey. They would I guess what's the right word I'm looking for here? Stagger the schedule to make sure that games start and end as soon as one begins and the next one ends. So whether that be a game starts in Germany, and then the next game starts somewhere else in a different time zone, 24/7 hockey is the idea, something that they're trying, or maybe not. I shouldn't say trying to do, but something they're looking into as like some sort of, how they do like the global series and stuff like that. Some sort of
yeah.
new thing that they can do with hockey, I guess, to just have the ratings on TV maybe at all times, which would be
They can't
pretty
get their
cool.
shit together in North America and not have every game start at 7:30. So maybe try to figure that out first, NHL, among the litany of other mistakes and bullshit that's going on with Boston and Chicago and all this other stuff, like Hockey Canada. Like, maybe let's just like figure it out here first, before we're gonna like have 24 hours of hockey. Like, they can barely get offsides right. They can barely know if the puck goes in the net. Lay off the extras. Just do your
Yeah,
job
well,
first and then move on.
the thing the thing to me that I really enjoyed though was that 5:30 start because I'm able to watch that game, and then next thing I know, the next game at 7:30 was starting, and I was just really enjoying being able to watch hockey after hockey after hockey and not having to miss anything in between, flipping back and forth between channels. So that was cool. But we get into the Ottawa game that started at 5:30, and this was a game where, again, the Ottawa Senators, another team towards the bottom of the league right now. Now, it's a little different because this is a team that does know how to score, right? They average about 3.5 goals per game. Their problem is keeping the puck out of the net. However, enter Cam Talbot, who comes back from injured reserve for his first game since being injured, which is a big boost for them. Yet the Islanders come out better in this game, and they take a 1-0 lead, a la Oliver Wahlstrom, who gave them the lead on the power play, no less. He received the power play time. I forget who sat that game. Um, was it
Ottawa
Josh
against
Bailey?
Ottawa. Josh Bailey,
Yeah,
second game of the
yeah,
season.
yeah. So Josh Bailey takes a seat. Oliver Wahlstrom takes his place on power play 2. And what do you know? He scores on the power play. That's again, that's going to be his bread and butter. That's probably going to be what gets him to stay as a regular, and that's his shtick, let's say, for Oliver Wahlstrom. It was a real nice goal too. You saw the goal, yes?
I did, and it was his first in 8 games. After a little
Right.
bit of a hot start, it was something he definitely needed to get jump started. I was happy to see he was on the power play, even if it was a little bit of a rush goal and not your typical power play. I guess it doesn't really matter how you get it done. You're on the man advantage. You got to take advantage of it. And good to see Pajot, who's on power play 1, as kind of the face-off guy, also getting rewarded. His first not empty net goal of the season. I think he had an empty net goal before, and scoring against Ottawa must be a pretty cool feeling, even all these years later. Um, Yes, I think for both of them, that depth scoring, it's kind of one of those nights. Like if and I think we'll talk about this in the second half of the show, but like Barzal without any goals, and some other players like Cizikas doesn't have any goals. Like that's kind of weird. Other players like Palmieri goes a little bit cold. He had a little bit of a streak. He's on and off. Bavillier's been ice cold. Um, so like it's good to have other players throughout the lineup. Like that depth really shines through. But yeah, definitely good to see Wallstrom get on the score sheet, and hopefully he can find some consistency in his game because I think he's still a little all over the place. I'm not seeing. Sometimes he's very engaged, north south. He's getting pucks to the net, and sometimes he's just rushing shots. And you have to shoot to score. Like I understand that, but sometimes it's just a shot to shoot, and it's way too quick. He didn't look. Um, it didn't help. Barzal and Wallstrom are very out of sync against Ottawa. Um, Barzal had two really bad passes to him. I think Mayfield or Lee also had a really bad pass to him. So I don't know if was it Wallstrom that was out of sync? Was it the team didn't look good? Again, really early in the game. I don't know where they are mentally. 5:30 start. You can only make up so many excuses. I said this last year. At a certain point, they're professionals. Like, it, are you really going to sit there and be like, oh, when the game started is the problem? Yikes. Like that can't be on a regular basis because the times are different. That can't be it. I'm a creature of habit too, very much so, but still, you have to adapt. It's literally your job. Um, this isn't beer league or high school or trap like where it's not the only thing that you're doing all day. Like this is pretty much it. You know the schedule ahead of time. Figure it out. Even with travel, I don't get it, but yeah, Wallstrom's got to figure that out. I think, consistency wise.
Yeah, well, the New York Islanders wind up, taking the lead, and then go into the second period with the lead, and halfway through, Batherson, ties things up. But quick response, right? Noah Dobson gets it right back and an assisted goal. And quick appreciation for Noah Dobson. I mean, he's still trying to figure things out with Alexander Romanov, but you see players who have phenomenal breakout years largely regress, and I think you're seeing a little bit of that with Moritz Seider, who was a Calder Trophy winner last year, and this year he's off to a bit of a slower start for Detroit, but Noah Dobson has just picked up right where he's left off. He's scoring goals. He's quarterbacking the power play, and he's actually playing really well 5-on-5. Like I said, still figuring things out with Alexander Romanov. They're getting better, I will say that. And I actually think that they've flipped places with Pelican Pollock. They're the top pairing defensive tandem right now for Lane Lambert. What are you seeing between Romanov and Dobson? And can you speak a little bit to Dobson's play?
I'm not sure they've switched to being the top pair. I still think Pellick and Pulak are the shutdown players. I think you're noticing their mistakes less. I think there's less of them. Um, it's one of those things. Romanov, I've said this before about him. I think if you don't notice him in a game other than hits, that's a good thing. Right. You don't need him to do anything special necessarily. You need him to be the rock for Dobson to score goals. I forget he's on the team sometimes, and I think that's good. I'm not saying this as a bad thing. I think he's definitely just doing what is asked of him and supporting Dobson. That's when we were thinking about them as a pairing, it was just to give Dobson the room to kind of do what he was going to do on offense and really be able to kind of shine that way and give a shot in the arm to the forward group and just the ability of the team to score goals. I don't think they're the shutdown pair yet. I think they have their role in the offensive zone. I'd like to see Romanov kind of get on the board a little bit more, and you haven't really seen him shoot the puck all that much. I'd be willing to bet he has the least amount of shots out of the defenseman without looking. I'd be willing to bet he has the least amount of shots out of the defenseman, save for Salo, considering he hasn't played. So I'd like to see him get involved like that, but I don't really need him to. Let Dobson do it and support your partner. I like what Dobson's doing. I mean, like 5 goals already, he had 13 all of last season. He'll have that by midseason, like by the All-Star break, which is kind of incredible. Um, I think as a tandem, you want to see them be a little bit better in the defensive zone, but I think you'd say that about the entire team, like the entire defensive group, where they kind of lose their way. Um, that's not 100% Dobson's game, and obviously he has a really good ability to get out of like escape from the opponent's forecheck with the puck. I've said that about the Islanders defense over the last couple of years. That's like something that they must practice that all the time because every defenseman can really move the puck and get it out of harm's way. Um, they look good. I mean, I like Dobson. He's really being dependent on to shoot that puck from the point. It's almost a little predictable now. I think they need to figure that out. I think a lot of that's on players like Barzal, who, buddy, got to shoot. Maybe we'll talk about that in the second half of the show. But especially him on the power play and in these moments, and luckily Dobson's scoring. If that dries up for a second and Barzell is still not scoring, like you have a serious problem. Um, because you can't depend on Lee and Nelson, and like if Bavilier is still not scoring, and who knows what Bailey's doing, he's in and out. Like if a couple guys go cold, like they're really screwed. So Dobson's really carrying the mail in that respect. Um, when the forward group isn't scoring those goals, he's really coming through. And luckily, you have guys like Peugeot and Parise and Palmieri at times, kind of that third line, who I said over the summer would be, if they can start scoring goals, you're really going to be able to tell a difference here. And lo and behold, that's exactly what's happened, because Bavilier, Wallstrom, Barzal, Bailey, not scoring goals. That line figuring it out, scoring goals when the team needs it. Same thing with Dobson. He's another one of those players picking it up for the players that aren't scoring. So only good things to say about Dobson. And like I said, not having a whole lot to say about Romanov is not a bad thing. I think that's good for him.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's one of those things, like you said, where no news is good news, and you're seeing that from Alexander Romanov. I think he's just been consistently steady, and that's okay. He's chipping the puck out when he needs to. He's helping keep the puck out of his own net, which is a good thing. And then the Islanders wind up taking over in the third period. Towards the middle of the period, John Gabriel Pageau gives the team the lead. Claude Giroux, though, takes it back a few minutes later, and late in the period, once again, Brock Nelson gives the Islanders their what was that, 11th win? How many wins they have? A good amount of wins. They're good enough for second place. Yeah, 11 wins, 11-6-0. So. Brock Nelson on a heater right now. It is everybody's saying Brovember, and I'm in the Nelvember club. Where are you?
I haven't thought about it. It doesn't matter. I just want him to score goals. I'd love to have the argument about what we're calling the month. I'm glad he turned it on. I don't really care if it was in October or November. They didn't have that many games in October, and they had quite a bit of games, and they have the next 5 of 7 on the road where they've struggled a little bit this season. So I'll call it whatever people want, as long as we have a reason to call it something.
I hear you. Overall, though, the game against Ottawa, a good showing in the sense that that's a team that the Islanders need to beat. Right, they're at the bottom of the league. They're not doing well at all. Alex DeBrincat is one of those guys who they brought in, and he's not really scoring. I think he's had 2 goals. He had 2 goals in like a 1 or 2 games prior to the game against the Islanders. But before that, I think he had 1 through like his first 10. So he's not really going. The only guy on that team that's really going right now is Claude Giroux, who's having a good time. But they have defensive issues. They have goaltending issues when Cam Talbot's not in the net. So it was good to see them lock it down.
Was out,
and Thomas Chabot was out. That's a good point.
Or
that's
Hot Sam Bacho, as Brian 5 or 6 says.
Yeah, and the thing is, with all those injuries, and all those things holding the centers back, it was good to see them, flip the script from the 2 games prior, where they played 2 teams who were also not very good, in terms of the standings. And lock this one down and take it, despite that 5:30 start, right? We said that when they don't play at 7 or later, it's a bit awkward for them. They they got off to a slow start, but this one they definitely locked it down, and they took those 2 points. So they're currently sitting in second place in the Metropolitan Division. They're fourth in the NHL. Um, look, like you and I have said this before, they're largely riding the goaltending. And it was one of those things where we said, and I believe we said this last week, right? They can afford to ride the goaltending because it's that good. The defense is giving up a little bit more in their own end, but to sacrifice the offense, right? And they've scored, aside from the Arizona game, in the last 3 games. It was 4 goals against the Senators. It was 4 goals against the Columbus Blue Jackets. So they're scoring over 3.5 goals a game, largely due to Brock Nelson, largely due to Anders Lee. But at the same time, they're also scoring by committee, and that's something good to see. Minus Mathew Barzal, who is still goalless. What's your thought on Mathew Barzal still being goalless? Although is it 17 or 18 assists now at this point? I think it's
18,
18.
but I do think that's better for the next half of the show.
Okay, we'll save it for the next half of the show. But how are you feeling now? 15 games in, 17 games in for the New York Islanders. 17 games in, 11-6, 647 point percentage, and their goal differential is plus 14. How are you feeling about the New York Islanders 17 games in?
I think they're figuring out ways to win, and that's ultimately all that I care about. I'd like them to eventually figure it out. What they're doing right now is not sustainable, and it doesn't look like playoff hockey, where that was what we were used to seeing kind of all year long. Maybe they're able to switch it on. This is largely the same group we've seen have quite a bit of success this is the 4th out of 5 seasons with Lamoriello as general manager, albeit with a different coach this season. So I think it's a season that's going pretty well. I think there was a good faction of Islander fans that were rightfully concerned about where this team is going based on the roster. There was some that wanted to kind of see what would happen if you were going to run it back. I think there's a good section of both that still wanted to see kind of a winger to come in, and whether that was Goudreau or a center like Kadri or JT Miller, who's having a terrible season. Thank God that he's not on this team right now with that kind of effort. And maybe it's just because he's having a tough time in Vancouver, is also just playing poorly as an entire team outside of Bo Horvat. I think ultimately this is kind of meeting a lot of people's expectations or above expectations, and that's fine. Like I said, I do think they need to lock it down at some point. They need the defense to kind of pull together and become a better unit like we were used to seeing, even though it's mostly different defenders, or 2 of them different defenders. And that's changed over the few years, and they've been able to adapt to that. So hopefully they can continue to do that and just maybe it's not necessarily stop relying on the goaltending, but rely on it when you need it, like against really good teams, like a Colorado Avalanche or Tampa Bay Lightning, who have really high offensive power, or even the Rangers, just like a fast team that scores goals. You need to be able to do that, and they've done it sometimes, late in games, but they need to be able to kind of spread that out a little bit and play with that kind of high octane. At both ends of the ice, they kind of let their foot off the gas a little bit here and there, and it's hurting them. They're 4-3 against Columbus is a joke. 4-2 against Ottawa is not great. So especially the way that they're doing it in the weak goals, and again, not on the goalies, but just kind of in general, you'd like to see them play a little bit more of a playoff style earlier, because maybe that's just because what we're used to.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. Things are going well. They definitely need to break some of those bad habits that they are continuing to make. It's not a huge concern yet, but it's becoming a little bit of a concern because of how long it's been going on to this point. So, you'd like to see them tighten up a little bit. and play a little bit of a cleaner game. Before we get into the second half of the show, I did want to ask you one more thing, and then we're going to get into specific players and some transactions, and then we'll end the show off on a buy or sell. But going into, and let's just say, it's a little bit early for this, but we're going to ask the question anyway. If they're in playoff position by February, and the trade deadline is approaching, what is the Islanders' biggest need right now? Is it a forward? Is it a defenseman? I don't think you're going to say goaltending, but what is their biggest need? You can give me position, you can give me the kind of player, whether that be a grinder, a sniper, or whatever. What is the Islanders' biggest need right now?
I think you shore up the offense. If you, and maybe both, maybe you get a forward and a defenseman. I don't think you need major changes to either of those things. You've been able to prove that the players on your roster can largely get it done. But if you can make something a little bit better, maybe you switch out an Aho for somebody else, even though Sal's around. I think by the time it gets to that point, you're really trying to solidify a playoff spot and then, go a couple rounds. Who knows if a guy like Salo is going to be it. You've seen really talented defensemen jump in, Cale Makar, yada, yada. I don't know that you're putting Salo on that level. Certainly not by what we've seen so far. And that's not necessarily a huge knock against him. It's just he's not moving the needle for the team. Just because he's a good player doesn't mean he's going to move the needle. He's doing what he needs to do, but at the trade deadline or something, thinking about the second half of the season, you really just need somebody to come in to do that. So it might be both. It might just be picking up somebody now. They're having less and less roster issues because they keep waiving players. So you're losing that problem. And they have this space, kind of depending on what happens with Soshnikov, to kind of play with there. I don't know if he's on a two-way or not, but regardless, I don't know who you need to move out. So like the roster spot thing isn't as much of a problem. It's more of the dollars and cents. So now Bailey's been healthy scratched twice. Bailey's been healthy scratched once. I don't know what that means. And I'm not suggesting trading one of them for that, but are they looking for somebody, like they're going to move somebody down? A Bailey and Beauvillier are going to be balloting it out for the 13th spot, not to, to just be on the everyday roster. I don't know. And I don't even know who the targets would be, but I think I think Lamoriello would want to show up both, frankly, just to make sure. And that might be insurance defenseman. It might be whatever this year's version of Andy Green is, on some team that, on an expiring deal, that's just an older guy that just can lock it down, on the left side with Mayfield. Or maybe you're moving. I don't know what Lamoriello's thinking. I don't know what Lambert's thinking, but it might likely be a seventh defenseman. If I had to pick right now, just to have that option, because I think they'd rather have Sal play the games and develop a little bit more. So there's really no use in rushing them, and Bridgeport's playing really well, so that's totally fine. And on the forward group, I have no idea. I think the first words out of everyone's mouth is a first line winger. I just don't know what that actually looks like. The dollars don't support that. Certainly not both. The dollars certainly do not support both of those things. So I don't know what they do. I don't know who they're moving out during the season. It just leads me to believe that they're running it just like this. They might pick up that seventh defenseman because that's relatively cheap, but they don't have the room during the season to do it because they'd have to move money out.
Nassauman Hockey is brought to you by DraftKings. NFL Sundays are only getting better, and so are the incredible offers at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 on any NFL team to win and get $200 in free bets if they do. Check this out. Right now, everyone can earn up to 100% boost with DraftKings stepped-up same-game parlays. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, place a same-game parlay, and combine multiple bets like which team will win, player props, and points totals. You know I'm going to bet that Zach Wilson's going to throw 2 touchdowns. With payouts bigger than ever, DraftKings Sportsbook is my go-to when betting on the NFL. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now, use promo code THPN, and place a $5 pregame moneyline bet to get $200 in free bets if your team wins. only at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL with code THPN. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details.
Well, that brings me to my next point, and we're moving on to the second half of our show, and I want to talk a little bit about a guy who has claimed a spot on the blue line, and he claimed a spot on the blue line over Robin Salo. Robin Salo is with the Islanders. He's been up and down, back and forth between Bridgeport and Long Island, but the reason that he hasn't really slotted in is because of the play of Sebastian Aho, and he has actually stepped up in a pretty big way. He scored a pretty nice goal a couple nights ago on with Mathew Barzal assisting him, and then after the game, you heard some comments from Barzal saying, him and I actually have a pretty good thing going right now. Not that he's a winger or anything, but he stepped up in a big way next to Mayfield, and he's playing steady, consistent, and he's simplified his game in Lambert's words and in his own words. What are you seeing from Sebastian Aho, who has taken over the sixth defensive role?
I mean, I think we spoke about this a little bit earlier, but I think he's finally figuring out what it takes to kind of solidify his game a little bit and slow down and not take every single chance. I think in one of his quotes, and just like not trying to hit every single breakaway pass. Sometimes you just need to do the right thing. Sometimes it's just getting the puck out and getting it out of the zone. It's not necessarily hitting that player. Just doing the safe thing is better. So I like what he's seeing. I like that Barzal mentioned that they're gaining a little bit of chemistry. So it's good to see that beyond Dobson, he has another player that he's kind of connecting with pretty well. So overall, I think it's good. As long as he's gaining confidence, it's clear that he's locked up that sixth spot. Sal's been kind of yo-yoed a little bit. Not really sure how I feel about it. I know we spoke about it last week. We think he's going to be up and down. They definitely need a seventh defenseman. They play 5 of 7 on the road the rest of this month. So it's likely that they just need somebody with the team. Which explains a little bit of that. And they're, if they're not going to play him and Aho's got that spot, you may as well send him to Bridgeport to play some games. And they're playing well. I think that gets his confidence up a little bit, at least gets him on the ice. But yeah, Aho's solidified that spot. I'm not going to argue with Lane Lambert on that front. So hopefully he can just keep playing the way that he is and kind of grow from there and limit the mistakes. They need everybody to kind of take that approach, because you're still seeing a lot of that throughout the defense. We kind of talked about like that to death in the first half here. But I like it. What about you?
Yeah, no, I just like that he simplified his game, right? He's not doing anything too crazy. We knew he was a good skater. He's a very good skater, and that's one of the things that the Islanders need, on their blue line, and one of the things that they wanted to improve this summer. They didn't, I guess, I don't know. They signed him to a 2-year deal, which was a surprise to me. I didn't think that they thought they were going to get an improvement on the blue line through Sebastian Aho. I think it's more of a pleasant surprise kind of thing. And he just makes them faster. So it's good to see that, and like I said, because he's such a good skater, he's able to skate the puck away from danger, and he skates it well in transition. And the biggest takeaway here from his game is that, like both he and Lane Lambert have said, he's just keeping his game simple, chipping the puck out of the defensive zone, making sure to make the smart plays and not try to make those stretch passes and make those mistakes like he used to. And one of the biggest problems that he actually said for himself was that, he was an all-star at the AHL level. And when he came to the NHL, he thought he could do the same things he did in the AHL. And that actually hurt him. He was making mistakes because he thought he could make those stretch passes like he did in the AHL. And look, the AHL they call the second best, professional hockey league in the world, and that might be very true, but it's a very different level of hockey between the AHL and the NHL, and he needed to figure out that middle ground for himself as to where his game was between the both the AHL and the NHL. He couldn't do what he did, at the lower level, and it's good to see that he's finally figured it out. He's not the ripe age of 22 anymore. He's 26 going on 27. But better late than never. And it's good news for the Islanders because, like I said, he's one of those guys who brings more speed. And so I like what I'm seeing from him a lot. The goal that he scored a couple nights ago, I thought was a really pretty play. One that, if you don't have the hands or the finish to be able to finish, you don't see plays like that happen very often. So it was good to see him get on the board and get rewarded for his hard work. All right, let's talk about some transactions, or a transaction that went down yesterday, and that was Nikita Soshnikov hit waivers, the second player to hit waivers for the Islanders this year. We know the first one was claimed by the Philadelphia Flyers in Kiefer Bellows. I don't know if I foresee a waiver claim coming for Nikita Soshnikov here, but Nikita Soshnikov has played in 3 games so far this season for the Islanders. He was largely just a replacement for Cal Clutterbuck whenever he went down. And although he did receive 2 games on the fourth line to replace Clutterbuck, there was one game where Lambert, and this, we could talk about this a little bit. Lambert pulled the trots, and Soshnikov was placed on the first line after being a scratch for 10 games. Right? 10 games he was a scratch, and yet he found himself on the first line. Only played about 10 minutes in that game. But, the thing with Soshnikov is that he looked pretty good in the preseason, right? He earned a spot on this team, and it was his speed and his edge work. He skates really well, and that was an emphasis this summer for the Islanders, getting to be faster, becoming a more speedy team, right? And that was part of the reason I think that he made this roster. Now, the Islanders haven't really utilized him, and we're going to talk a little bit about later about what's going on in Bridgeport, because some good things are happening down there. But because he's only played 3 games to this point and hasn't put up any points, I guess there wasn't really a need for him, right? And maybe now it's time to send him down to Bridgeport. Give them another body, because you plan on bringing somebody up. And we'll see if that is what is going to happen. But Nikita Soshnikov hits waivers, the only forward addition to the New York Islanders this summer. What are your thoughts on Soshnikov hitting waivers?
He wasn't playing all that well when he was in the lineup, and it was confusing if Clutterbuck was going to be fine. I think the putting him on waivers is weird because Clutterbuck has been in and out of the lineup. And I don't know that you want Ross Johnson and Martin in the lineup on the same line. I think it's been a concern of mine for a couple of years now with those players. So I'm just really not sure what's going on. I'm not sure what the thought process was bringing him in. I'm not sure what the thought process is letting him go, because you also don't have Bellows. You're just kind of, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. Now they have 13 forwards. Your only replacement, if anyone goes down, is like on the roster. So on this road trip, as it stands, as the time we're recording this on Tuesday night, they only have Ross Johnson to replace them. True. I think, obviously someone like Josh Bailey can play center. I think they have some options here and there, but like Bailey's a winger now. So like I guess I just don't really know what the plan is. They could call somebody up. I don't know why you would do that. Like, I don't think the Islanders need that kind of help. I think they need bodies as their 13th and 14th forward to simply fill in at times. You're not really looking for anyone to step in and score goals. Like, they don't have anyone competing for spots anymore. It's kind of like, this is the roster and people will kind of figure it out. So like, I think Bridgeport's playing really well. Just let them have success. It's like, it's been the first time in a while they're playing well. Like, who cares? Leave it alone. So I don't really understand what's going on. I know people would argue against that and they want to see Holmstrom and all this other stuff. I don't care. I say leave him in Bridgeport. Let him have a good season together. Let that next class of Islanders do for Ratu and Isakov and Holmstrom. Like, let the 4 of them build that bond and win a championship or go deep into playoffs together in the AHL. Let them just do it. That's the future of your team. Let them do that together. Look at the way that the Crunch and Tampa Bay do it. And I only say that because I'm close. I watched Syracuse over the years. make deep playoff runs, second and third round consistently with a lot of these players. And then it wasn't long before they were getting called up to Tampa Bay and doing that. There's no reason to rush these players. Absolutely not. Outside of Holmstrom, none of them have played a professional game before this season. Ratu played a couple. Let them just do their thing. There's just Holmstrom is just he's finally having a better year. His points aren't great. Maybe they need winger help. I'd assume he'd be the one, frankly. The other ones, Holmstrom before the others. I'd say he'd be the only one.
Yeah, so that was going to be my next question too, because the candidates obviously are Simon Holmstrom, Aatu Räty, William Dufour, and Ruslan Iskakov. And right now, Iskakov leads the Bridgeport Islanders with something like 17 points in 14 games, and I think that he's towards the top of the AHL in points too, which is really great to see. But like you said, Holmstrom, could be the first recall. I think Räty and Dufour still need some seasoning down there. And to your point, Holmstrom's points aren't through the roof right now. You are correct. I think he's got 5 through 10 or more games. But what we saw in the preseason was that Holmstrom did get a couple of looks with Barzal. I think he had a bunch of days in camp where he skated on the same line as him. I think he had a couple of games in preseason where he skated on the same line as Barzal as well. And the one thing I noticed is that, Barzal doesn't have any consistent line mates yet still. It's still kind of a revolving door. So you wonder, I know Wahlstrom has been there for a few games lately, but he's been kind of in and out of that spot between the first and the third line. Parise's been up and down over there. Josh Bailey's been up and down over there. Could the Islanders maybe be looking to find an internal candidate? I don't think that they're necessarily shopping anything right now. Could they maybe trying to find an internal candidate in Simon Holmstrom after he got that look in preseason? I do wonder. So we'll find out tomorrow, after Soshnikov clears waivers, and maybe even before that, depending on what morning skate looks like, if there will be any recalls for the New York Islanders as far as one of those younger players. But to your point, like you said, let them grow together, get some playoff experience in the AHL. That would be a good idea as well. My devil's advocate statement to that would be that although you're right, the organization cares less about the Bridgeport Islanders' success and more about the New York Islanders' success. And if they feel one of those players will help the varsity Islander lineup, they are going to make that call and bring them up. So we will see if that happens. But John, let's end the show with a fun little game. Let's play buy or sell. And piggybacking on the Soshnikov conversation, he is on waivers, which means there is an open roster spot. Ruslan Iskakov, and you kind of answered this already, so I think I know where you're going to go with this, will be the first call-up from the Bridgeport Islanders this season.
Sell Holmstrom. Let the kids play in Bridgeport. Call up somebody that's been around, even though Holmstrom's really not been around that long, because he's still 21, 22 years old. I'm not sure where he'd fit on the Islanders' main roster. I think it just gives Lambert the ability to kind of move some things around a bit. I'm not entirely sure who to play with Barzal at this point, because it's not Lee and Nelson. They're playing well together. Leave them alone. That Parise, Peugeot, Palmieri line is good. Leave it alone. Wahlstrom's inconsistent. Do you play? You're gonna tell me Holmstrom is going to play over Bailey even most of the time, and then he's going to play with Barzal and Wahlstrom? I don't understand where that's going. So, really that goes for any of them, but Holmstrom in particular, just because he is a little bit older and has a little bit more pro experience. But any of those, I have no idea. I sell on the entire idea that that's actually going to happen. They need to call somebody up because they need a forward. And honestly, the way that it's been going, and you got to remember, Lambert probably gets a say as far as his opinion. Lamoriello is making the decision. And based on things like last season with Grant Hutton and some other players, it's, you know what? It's probably someone we're not thinking of. It's probably just another winger. that's gonna. It's likely not any of those players, not even Holmstrom. It's like I don't know that roster all that well. This is where Mitch would come in and be able to say something on that, but it's likely honestly it's likely none of them. It's likely somebody that's just playing well enough that doesn't need to be in every single night.
I'm gonna sell on the idea as well. I don't think it's gonna be Iskakov. I think it could be Holmstrom though, for reasons that we stated earlier in the episode. However, one of the things that we don't normally see from Lou Lamoriello is him retracting some of his statements or backtracking one of his statements. And he did say by the end of preseason that maybe he was wrong about the development and how far along William Dufour and Aatu Aatu are in their development. So he is a little bit higher on those two than we initially thought when they first arrived at training camp. So there is that outside possibility that, hey, maybe one of those guys gets a spin or two at the NHL level, gets a crack, makes their debut. We will see what happens. But our next one here is on Brock Nelson, and he is currently on a 43.5 goal pace this season. He was on a 42 goal pace over an 82 game span last season. Nelson will hit the 40 plus goal mark for the first time in his career at the end of this year. Are you buying or are you selling?
If you had asked me in October or even 10 games in, I would have said no. I would have said sell. I say buy now because he's finding ways to put the puck in the net. Empty net, off the rush, tip-ins around the net, and he's kind of scoring every way that you can. Him and Lee seem to just be able to find each other, and it's on the power play. It's 5-on-5. Like he's just having a great season. He's really the offense is kind of going through him a little bit, and Lee and Barzal. And maybe we should add a buy or sell here for Barzal because we didn't really answer that question before about the him scoring and no goals so far this year and kind of what we felt about it. So we might want to think of that on the go here. But yeah, I buy on Nelson 40 goals. Let's go.
I hate agreeing with you, but here I go. I am going to agree with you as well. I'm going to buy just because the Islanders are playing a totally different system than they were last year. He was on a 40 plus goal pace in a defensive structure. Now they're playing much more running gun. And like you said, the offense is largely being driven through him, Lee, and Nelson. And I think he's at the forefront of that. So I'm going to buy on Nelson hitting the 40 goal mark. Let's go on the fly here with Mathew Barzal. And Mathew Barzal will score this week. Buy or sell?
I mean, you gotta buy eventually, but he's gotta shoot the puck. I've never seen somebody so predictable at this point that if he shot the puck, he'd score. Well, granted, he was even missing the net. It's maddening to watch him. Forget about all those assists. I know that's important. I've seen there's like an argument that, could he score no goals this season and have 82 assists, and is that a good year? No. He needs to be part of the offense in both ways. I'm not talking about scoring 30 goals. 20. Like he can be 100-point player or at least an 80 to 100-point player. But that means he needs to shoot the puck. It's embarrassing watching because there's so many turnovers, and frankly, for all those assists, he might be one of the biggest culprits on turnovers. I know it's really hard to say that. I know as the star of this team, he's most guilty, I think, for turnovers for the Islanders because he's just trying to throw the puck, and a lot of times it looks really great. He's dishing it off. He's moving. I love that. At a certain point, like you got to drive the net. You have that speed. Like he's on 2-on-1s. Watching him pass the puck is just, and he's got a clear lane. At least shoot for the rebound. I think I'd blame him less to getting an assist that way. But I don't know. He's got to shoot the score at a certain point, and I don't know. I don't even know how to split it up. Less than half the time he's dishing the puck, it's actually an assist. Think about how many passes he makes a game. It's not likely. as for as many points as he has, it's not likely that it's going to lead to a goal. He needs to kind of figure that out. It's, if
Yeah,
anything, too predictable, but it's just not working out.
I think there is something to say though about your leading skater in terms of time on ice versus how many opportunities he has to maybe turn over a puck or maybe even something about Mathew Barzal's line mates and not being able to have that chemistry where he is thinking two steps ahead of his line mates and he's skating the puck into the offensive zone. He's there before everybody else just because he has that foot speed. He could get there, and his line mates are lagging behind, and he's trying to figure out, okay, I got here before everybody else. I kind of anticipated them doing something different. What do I do next? And then, next thing you know, there's a turnover in the offensive zone. And the Islanders do lose the puck. But buying or selling, I am going to I want to look at the schedule this week and see who the Islanders are playing for the remainder. They have the Predators on Thursday, the Stars on Saturday. I'm gonna sell. He's not gonna score this week. He's gonna score Monday against the Toronto Maple Leafs in Toronto. For the first time this season. I think the two teams that the Islanders have coming up are good defensive structured teams. Although the Dallas Stars have changed their game a little bit, and they're a little bit more like the Islanders in the sense that they're running gun now. But I don't buy that he'll score against those two teams. I think he'll score against the Maple Leafs, who have their own problems, like we said. He is scoring, or I'm sorry, he is shooting 2.5 shots per game. Even if he shot once more per game, that's a lot more over an 82 game season. So
it's not just more; it's the opportunities he's passing up.
right,
Like it's the extra passes. It's a bunch of 2-on-1s where like he's got the lane, and then the pass is broken up. Like they're not even getting a shooting. He's missing an opportunity for the team to get a shot on goal. Forget about him. The puck's not going to the net. More often than not, the puck's not going to the net after he passes. Like, you just get the puck to the net more. He needs to be more responsible for that. It'll wind up leading to more goals, even if it's not from him necessarily. It's so many of these passes are simply not good passes. I'm noticing it more and more. They're getting picked off again on odd man rushes or whatever. Just get the puck to the net. I understand wanting to get it over to Wallstrom, but he's not being responsible with those shots either. So he's shooting it, and it's not a good shot. It's from too far out. It was like him and Palmieri on odd man rushes. We said this last time, way outside the dots. That's not a good pass. I know you got the pass to him, and it looks great, but that's not useful for anything. Like it's some of that. The strategic thinking needs to get worked on a little bit with him. I'm not buying how he's thinking the game. And look, if you're a player that's that good, you either need to do it all like McDavid and be able to go coast to coast, or you need to be good enough to adapt. And Barzal's not adapting. He's trying to play his game without the rest of the team being able to keep up with that. And it takes a better player to adapt your game. I know that's very harsh. I don't think anyone's saying that. Not to be unique, but like, if he's going to be a star in this league and he's going to lead the Islanders, he just got a big fat contract. He needs to be the one that adapts his game to the rest of the team, the players around him. It doesn't matter who he's playing with. I think that's going to be the difference between this team taking the next step or not. He needs to be the one that's adapting moving forward.
Yeah, I think you're right. He could stand to definitely take more of those shots that he hasn't been taking. Totally agree with you. It has been frustrating to see, some of the opportunities he's passing up, a la Josh Bailey, the past couple of years. But the last buy or sell I have here for you is the Islanders have held up in the top two in the Metropolitan Division for over a week now. They'll finish the season in one of those top two spots by the end of the year.
Sell, but I think they'll be in the first wild card. And
okay,
I'm not sure if that'll be better or not. I know we kind of had them locked in at the beginning of the season for the second wild card, but something tells me they'll drop a little bit. They need, based on history, they've had a weak end of the season. If they can start, reversing that a little bit and and playing a little bit more consistent, I'd buy it. I'd buy on even third in the Metro. But just the way that they're losing these games and thinking about how they've played late in the season, I can't buy on that. Even with the winning streak and all that.
I don't know if they'll be top two, but I'm going to sell as well. I think they could be good enough for third, right? I think that the Penguins have dropped off. I think the Capitals have dropped off. I think that the Rangers are not as good as everybody thought that they were. I think the Hurricanes are the best team in the division. So it's between, in my opinion, the Hurricanes, the Rangers, the Islanders, and the Devils for, the top three spot in wild card one. That wild card two for me is a bit of a crapshoot. It could be anybody. But I think we're starting to see a shift in this division. I think, it's hard to say the Islanders are the shift. They have been, in that conversation last year aside for a couple of years now. But the Devils, I think, are up there now. The Rangers, they were good last year. I think they're not as good as everybody thought that they were. So they're kind of, they can go up and down. They could be, one of the positions. They could be in the wild card. Not too sure yet. But there's definitely a shift in the division with the Penguins and the Capitals not being as good as we all thought they were going to be. In my opinion, I think that they are candidates to either be wild card teams or possibly miss. So top two, maybe not. I think I'll sell on that. I think they're good enough to be third in the division. And it will be interesting to see how it shakes out. Like you and I have said, Devils look real good. Carolina is who they are. And we'll see if the Rangers can claim one of those top three spots in the Metro with Igor Shesterkin looking like a human. I don't know if you kept up with the Rangers at all, but he has not played like he has in the previous season. I think that's all we have for this week, John. Any final thoughts from you?
I think that's it. I just want to see this team play a little bit more up to their potential and play more consistently. That's the closing thought.
Yeah, I hear you there. And the Islanders take on the Predators next on Thursday at 8 p.m. in Nashville against the Predators. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to or watch the show. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Nassman Hockey. You can find my work at the Fourth Period. You can find John's work at the Hockey Writers, and check out Isles Fix. Isles Fix is back. It's been in your inbox every morning if you already subscribe, and if you don't, you're going to want it. So definitely subscribe to Isles Fix there. And John, take us away. Oh, wait, that's my job. Until next time, let's go Islanders.